The sun was sinking behind the jagged cliffs surrounding Red Creek, setting the sky ablaze with streaks of orange and crimson that made the desert dust glow like embers. The town lay quiet, its streets empty except for the occasional creak of a swinging sign or the distant bark of a dog. Even the wind seemed to hold its breath, carrying a heavy, sorrowful stillness across the worn wooden sidewalks and sun-bleached rooftops. Alizay stumbled into the clearing at the edge of town, her slender frame trembling, eyes wide and haunted. Her chestnut hair, tangled and streaked with dust, clung to her pale, tear-streaked face. In her hands, she clutched a small bundle wrapped in faded cloth, frayed at the edges from constant handling. She had run for what felt like an eternity, bare feet bleeding and coated in dust, searching for the one person who might listen, the Apache warrior the townsfolk called Takoda. Stories followed him like a shadow, fearsome in battle, unwavering in justice, protector of the land's secrets. But Takoda spoke little and struck swiftly, and many who encountered him never forgot the calm authority of his presence or the quiet danger lurking beneath. Alizay's voice broke through the silence, soft and trembling. "Sir, can you bury my younger sister? She is no more." Her words faltered, swallowed by sobs that shook her tiny frame. She sank to her knees, clutching the bundle tighter, hoping the warrior's famed honor would extend even to a stranger and desperate. Grief. Takoda sat beside a small fire, the dying embers casting a warm, flickering light over his bare, muscular chest. His long black hair hung over his broad shoulders, catching the last rays of sunlight and reflecting them like molten gold. His dark eyes, deep and knowing, studied Alizay carefully, as if weighing her sorrow against the harsh desert truths he had lived by. Scars on his arms and chest traced the stories of battles and losses no one dared speak of, each one a silent testament to endurance, pain, and survival. Alizay's sobs echoed through the canyon, raw and fragile, a plea carried on the wind. The bundle she carried contained the only remnants of her sister, a cracked, weathered doll with one missing eye, a faded ribbon once tied in her sister's hair, and a tiny pair of scuffed boots. "Please, she doesn't deserve to lie in the sun, forgotten." Her words trembled, mingling with the swirling desert dust that twined around her like spirits stirred by grief. Takoda rose slowly, muscles rippling under his skin, the movement fluid and commanding. The jewelry around his wrists and neck jingled softly as he gestured for her to follow, a single nod, no words, but an unmistakable promise that he would help. Alizay's wide eyes shimmered with disbelief, relief, and gratitude all at once. She had no other hope. She clutched the bundle tighter and stood, determined to follow him wherever he led. The desert path ahead was rough, strewn with jagged stones and coarse sand. The cliffs rose like ancient sentinels, shadows lengthening as the last light faded. The wind carried the sharp scent of sage and pine, and the faint trace of distant creeks, blending into a heady, earthy perfume. Each step was treacherous, but Takoda's steady presence beside her lent Alizay a fragile sense of safety she hadn't felt since her sister's death. From the edge of town, townsfolk whispered behind shuttered windows, eyes wary. Some shook, their heads in pity, others in fear, hesitant to intervene. Takoda's reputation preceded him. He demanded respect not through words but through unwavering action, and any who dared oppose him faced swift and decisive consequences. Alizay's heart thumped wildly in her chest, the desert's chill and the weight of grief pressing down on her. Yet, for the first time since her sister had passed, she sensed a glimmer of hope. This stranger, with eyes like midnight and hands strong enough to command life and death, had agreed to grant her sister a proper resting place. The journey had only just begun, but already Alizay felt that the desert might yield something she thought lost forever, peace, justice, and the possibility of closure. The wind whistled through the narrow canyon walls, carrying with it the scent of sage and pine mixed with the dry dust of the desert. Alizay's bare feet scraped against the jagged stones, leaving thin, uneven tracks in the pale sand. Every step made her ankles ache, but she pressed on, the weight of her sister's memory bundled tightly against her chest, urging her forward. Behind her, Takoda moved like a shadow, silent and fluid, the faint glint of tribal jewelry on his neck and wrists catching the last light of the sun. His presence was both comforting and unnerving, strong, protective, yet reminding her of the vast power she could never hope to match. "Sir." Alizay's voice was barely audible above the wind, a fragile thread of sound. "Do you always help strangers like this?" Takoda did not answer immediately. He glanced at her from the corner of his eye, the muscles in his jaw tightening slightly, then turned back to the path ahead. His footsteps were steady, deliberate, and silent, betraying no hint of fatigue. It was clear that he moved with purpose, and every movement carried the weight of experience. Finally, after several moments, he spoke in a low, calm voice that seemed to blend with the desert itself, only when it honors the land or the dead. Alizay swallowed, unsure whether she understood him completely, but she felt a flicker of reassurance. The desert stretched endlessly on either side of the narrow path. Towering cliffs rose like silent sentinels, their reddish-brown surfaces streaked with cracks and shadows. The sun's last light painted the rocks in warm tones, making the landscape seem both beautiful and unforgiving. A sense of isolation pressed down on Alizay's shoulders, but it was tempered by the warrior's quiet presence, a reminder that she was not entirely alone. As they walked, she studied him furtively. Takoda's bare chest was dust-streaked, his skin glistening faintly with sweat in the fading light. Every movement revealed rippling muscles honed by years of survival, and his long black hair fell freely over his shoulders, occasionally catching in the wind. Tribal jewelry jingled softly with each step, small reminders of his heritage, of a life intertwined with honor, battle, and the land itself. Despite his fearsome reputation, there was a calm gravity to him that made her feel a strange sense of safety, even as the desert's chill crept into her bones. "Will she rest soon?" Alizay asked hesitantly, her voice breaking again. Her fingers clenched around the bundle as if her grasp alone could protect her sister from the world. Takoda's gaze lingered on the horizon, where the canyon walls gave way to rolling dunes bathed in twilight. He knelt briefly, brushing sand from a stone and leaving it untouched as though paying respect to something unseen. Then he rose and replied, voice steady but soft, "The earth will take her. She will rest where the wind speaks and the cliffs watch over her." Alizay nodded, tears brimming again, though her sobs were quieter now, subdued by exhaustion and the quiet authority of the warrior beside her. The desert seemed to hold its breath, waiting, listening, as if acknowledging the solemn promise. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the wind and the soft crunch of stone beneath their feet. The sun disappeared entirely, leaving the canyon bathed in deep blues and purples, shadows stretching and merging like ghostly fingers across the landscape. Stars began to prick the sky, scattered and distant, each one twinkling like a silent witness to their journey. Alizay shivered, whether from the desert's chill or her grief, she could not tell. Takoda, unaffected, moved beside her with the unflinching precision of a man who had spent decades living on the edge of life and death. Suddenly, a sound broke the quiet, a rustle, soft and deliberate, coming from somewhere deeper in the canyon. Alizay froze, heart hammering, as Takoda's hand instinctively went to the knife at his belt. He moved like a predator, muscles coiled, eyes scanning the shadows with a focus that made the hairs on the back of Alizay's neck stand up. "It's only the wind," he said after a moment, though his tone carried no certainty. Or perhaps something curious. Alizay drew in a shaky breath, unsure whether to feel relief or fear. The desert held secrets, and every shadow seemed to whisper stories of lives lost, battles fought, and unseen dangers lurking just out of sight. Yet, in the presence of Takoda, she felt a fragile thread of hope that they would reach the secluded spot where her sister could rest, and hope that the warrior's silent promise would hold against whatever trials the desert might throw at them. As they continued, Alizay's thoughts drifted to her sister, the laughter, the small joys, the final, heartbreaking silence that had driven her to this path. She clutched the bundle closer, drawing comfort from its familiar weight, and took a tentative step forward. Beside her, Takoda's steady stride and unwavering vigilance reminded her that even in the harshest, most unforgiving desert, there could be protection, honor, and a chance to give her sister the peace she deserved. The canyon widened slightly as night deepened, leaving only the soft glow of the warrior's firelight and the pale wash of moonlight to guide their steps. The desert air was sharp and cold now, carrying the scent of damp earth from distant creeks and the faint smoke of sage from Takoda's belt pouch. Every footfall on the hard, uneven rocks echoed like a drumbeat of inevitability. Alizay's legs ached and her bare feet were scraped and bruised, yet she kept moving, driven by the memory of her sister's laughter, the softness of her hair, the innocence she had been forced to bury too soon. At last, Takoda stopped at a secluded clearing, shielded from the canyon's mouth by towering red cliffs. Shadows pooled like dark water around the edges, and the moonlight fell in pale silver beams across the dusty earth. Alizay knelt immediately, clutching her sister's tiny boots and the faded ribbon, whispering a name into the night that no one could hear but the wind. Her voice quivered, breaking and raw, as she tried to hold herself together, though the tears flowed freely down her cheeks. Takoda crouched beside her, his bare, muscular chest gleaming faintly in the moonlight. His long black hair swayed with the desert breeze, and the tribal jewelry around his wrists and neck glinted softly, catching the faint shimmer of starlight. He set down the crude shovel he had carried in silence, one that looked worn but effective, and began to dig with methodical care. Each movement was precise, powerful, yet reverent, as though he was honoring something far greater than the simple act of moving earth. Alizay watched him, unable to speak. There was something almost otherworldly in the way he moved, the quiet authority in his posture, the focused intensity in his dark eyes. He did not glance at her, but she felt his awareness like a protective aura surrounding her fragile body. Around them, the desert seemed to hold its breath. The usual chorus of nocturnal wildlife was absent, replaced by a stillness that carried the weight of something sacred. Finally, Takoda paused, resting on the shovel's handle. He wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, and then, in a voice low and solemn, spoke. "The earth will remember her, Alizay. She will rest where the wind and cliffs guard her. Your care has brought her here, and this soil will honor her memory." Alizay's lips trembled, and she nodded, clutching the bundle closer to her chest. She wanted to reach out, to touch his arm in gratitude, but the moment felt too sacred, too heavy with grief and unspoken reverence. Instead, she knelt silently, letting her tears fall freely onto the warm, dusty ground. The shovel dug into the soil with steady rhythm, earth giving way reluctantly under the force of Takoda's muscular arms. Each scoop carried weight not just of soil, but of the sorrow and finality of loss. Alizay's heart ached as she imagined her sister lying beneath the dirt, tiny and fragile, no longer able to speak or laugh or run through the fields that now existed only in memory. She pressed the cracked doll and ribbon close to her heart, whispering a soft prayer into the wind. "Rest now. You are not forgotten. I will carry you with me always." The warrior worked in silence, his muscles rippling beneath the firelight, hands skilled and unhurried. His tribal jewelry jangled softly with each movement, a quiet rhythm that seemed to echo the beating of a distant drum in the desert night. Finally, the grave was deep enough, and he set the shovel aside. Alizay carefully placed the bundle into the earth, and a hush fell over the clearing as she brushed the first handfuls of dirt over her sister, her hands trembling but determined. Takoda knelt beside her, pulling a small pouch from his belt. He scattered herbs across the grave, the faint aroma of sage and desert flowers filling the air, mingling with the dry scent of soil and wind. The firelight reflected off his dark eyes, calm and deep, carrying a wisdom that seemed older than the desert itself. "She will walk free with the wind," he murmured, voice almost lost to the night. "And you, Alizay, you must be strong. The world is harsh, but courage, love, and honor endure." Alizay looked at him, drawing in a trembling breath. For the first time since her sister's death, she felt a flicker of peace. The desert night, wrapped around them, alive with the whispers of unseen creatures and the soft rustle of sage. Somewhere in the shadows, a coyote howled, and she imagined it as a guardian spirit, a witness to the sacred act she had been allowed to perform. The first time, she realized that grief could coexist with hope, and that even in the harshest, most unforgiving places, kindness and honor could leave a mark as lasting as the wind-carved cliffs themselves. She straightened, brushing the dirt from her knees, and whispered one final promise to her sister: "I will live, and I will carry you with me always." The desert night stretched on, a vast expanse of black velvet sprinkled with starlight. The moon hung low over the jagged cliffs, casting long silver shadows across the clearing. Alizay remained kneeling beside her sister's freshly turned grave, her hands pressed to her chest, her small body shaking with grief. Yet, beneath her sorrow, a fragile sense of peace had begun to bloom. Takoda, still kneeling nearby, had finished scattering the herbs, and for a moment the desert was silent, holding its breath with them. Alizay finally lifted her gaze to him, curiosity mingling with awe. The fire from earlier had burned low, leaving only the pale moonlight to illuminate his bare, muscular chest and the intricate tattoos that ran along his arms. Each mark told a story she could not yet understand of battles fought, victories won, lives lost. Tribal jewelry glinted faintly in the moonlight, the sound of metal soft against the quiet night. You are very strong," she said softly, almost a whisper, "and very skilled. How did you learn to do all this?" Takoda's dark eyes met hers for the first time since the burial, and Alizay felt a strange weight in that gaze, as if he could see every sorrow she had ever carried. His voice was low, almost blending with the rustle of the desert wind. "Learned because I had to," he said, "because life is not always kind, and the land does not forgive mistakes. Strength is necessary, and loss is inevitable." Alizay swallowed, trying to understand. She had known grief, but the depth of his words made her feel that she had only begun to scratch the surface of the world's harshness. And yet, there was a calm wisdom in him, a sense that even though life demanded cruelty, it also offered moments of grace. She glanced at his arms again, tracing the tattoos in her mind. Have you lost someone?" she asked hesitantly, unsure if it was proper to pry. Takoda's gaze drifted toward the cliffs, the moonlight reflecting off his dark eyes. A subtle shadow passed over his expression, and for the first time, Alizay noticed a trace of vulnerability in the warrior who seemed otherwise unyielding. "Yes," he said quietly, almost to himself. "I have, and the land remembers those we cannot save." Alizay felt her chest tighten. She realized that this man, this stranger who had guided her through grief and buried her sister with honor, carried a sorrow as deep as her own. The desert, had shaped him into a protector, a guardian, and perhaps a man who had learned to survive loss by giving what he could to others. A sudden rustle broke the silence. Alizay jumped, heart pounding, but Takoda's stance immediately shifted. Muscles tensed, shoulders squared, eyes scanning the dark canyon like a hawk searching for prey. His bare chest gleamed faintly in the moonlight, tribal jewelry jingling. Softly as he moved with predator-like precision. "Who's there?" Alizay whispered, trembling. Takoda's hand rested lightly on the knife at his belt. "Perhaps only the wind." "Or curiosity," he said, voice calm yet laced with warning. "The desert has eyes, Alizay. It watches everything." She nodded, swallowing hard, feeling both fear and admiration. Despite his silence, his action spoke volumes, the way he moved, the way he sensed danger, the way he seemed connected to the land itself. Alizay felt as if she had stepped into a world far larger than the small town she had fled, a world alive with hidden truths and invisible guardians. "Why did you help me?" she asked, voice trembling. "I'm just a girl, and you didn't have to." Takoda's gaze softened slightly. "Because I know what it is to lose someone you love, and because the land deserves honor. Sometimes those who wander alone must carry the burden of others' grief." Alizay felt warmth bloom in her chest, a fragile hope mingling with the sorrow that had defined her life for so long. The desert seemed less empty now, less threatening. Here, beneath the stars and cliffs, she had encountered someone who understood loss, not only in words but in the very fiber of his being. For the first time since her sister's death, she allowed herself to breathe fully, to feel that perhaps in the vast, unforgiving desert, kindness and courage could exist. And that, even in the silence of night, even in the shadows of cliffs and memories, the world could still offer moments of protection, respect, and unexpected grace. Alizay straightened, brushing dust from her knees, and looked at Takoda. In that quiet exchange of glances, she understood something important. He was more than a warrior. He was a guardian, a silent sentinel of the desert and of those who could not defend themselves. And tonight, he had given her sister the peace she deserved and her grief a place to rest, if only for a moment. The first hints of dawn had not yet reached the desert, but the eastern horizon glimmered faintly, pale as ash. Alizay remained near her sister's grave, her fingers clutching the faded ribbon once more, her eyes hollow with exhaustion but also with the faintest glimmer of relief. She had hoped the night's ritual would pass without incident, that the desert would hold its peace until she could gather the strength to return to Red Creek. But the desert was never quiet for long. A faint rustle came from the canyon walls, almost imperceptible at first, like the whisper of sand across stone. Alizay stiffened, every nerve taut, and her breath caught in her throat. Takoda's head snapped toward the sound, his dark eyes narrowing, pupil sharp as a hawk's. His bare chest gleamed with the faint moisture of sweat in the early light, the muscles taut beneath his skin. Tribal jewelry jingled softly as he shifted his stance, ready. "Sir, what is it?" Alizay whispered, clutching the bundle tighter, her small body trembling. Takoda's eyes scanned the shadows where the canyon walls met the rising desert wind. "Stay behind me," he said, voice low and commanding. "The desert is full of those who would take what is not theirs." From the shadows, figures began to emerge, rough men with faces hardened by greed and cruelty, their hands gripping pistols, rifles, and crude clubs. The leader sneered, revealing yellowed teeth, eyes fixed on the girl and the bundle she carried. "Looks like we found our treasure," he spat, a cruel smirk twisting his face. Alizay's heart raced, and she shrank closer to the earth, hiding behind the shallow mound where her sister now rested. Takoda stepped forward, his stance wide, muscles coiled like a spring ready to release. Every movement was deliberate, exuding strength and deadly precision. The sunlight, now breaking over the horizon, caught the glint of the tribal jewelry around his neck and wrists, and the faint scars that traced his arms and chest only added to his intimidating presence. "You will not touch her," he said, voice calm but laced with steel. The leader laughed, taking a step forward, waving his pistol. But Takoda did not flinch. Instead, he moved with a predator's grace, muscles rippling as he closed the distance in a heartbeat. The first man lunged at him, knife raised. Takoda's reflexes were honed beyond imagination. In one fluid motion, he sidestepped, grasping the attacker's wrist and twisting with controlled force until the knife clattered to the ground. A swift kick sent the man sprawling into the dust, groaning. Alizay watched wide-eyed as the warrior moved like the desert wind itself, fast, lethal and impossibly strong. Another attacker aimed a rifle, but Takoda was already moving, his long hair whipping around his shoulders, muscles coiling and uncoiling with predatory precision. With a swift strike, he disarmed the man, sending the weapon spinning across the rocks. The remaining assailants hesitated, uncertainty flickering in their eyes for the first time. Alizay held her breath, heart pounding, feeling the rhythm of fear and awe mingling within her. The desert seemed alive, watching, as if the cliffs themselves had sent the warrior to protect her. Takoda's eyes met hers, briefly calm, assured, and fiercely protective, and she felt a sudden, inexplicable courage. One by one, the attackers fell back, retreating into the shadows from which they came. Takoda's movements were a blur, efficient and precise, a combination of skill, instinct, and sheer power. When the last man fled, silence returned, broken only by the whisper of the desert wind and Alizay's shallow breathing. Takoda exhaled, muscles relaxing, and turned toward her. His dark eyes softened, though the intensity of the night's events still lingered in his gaze. "They will not trouble us again," he said, voice low but calm. "The desert remembers those who respect it and punishes those who do not." Alizay stood shakily, brushing dirt from her knees, feeling a mixture of relief and awe. The warrior had protected her and her sister's grave with a skill and ferocity that seemed almost supernatural. She looked at him, a new understanding dawning. He was not just a protector of the land, but a guardian of the vulnerable, the lost, and those who could not defend themselves. The rising sun painted the cliffs in warm hues, casting golden light over the clearing. Alizay felt a fragile sense of hope stirring inside her, mingling with the lingering grief for her sister. She understood now that even in the harshest desert, even in the face of those who sought harm, courage, honor, and the unexpected kindness of a stranger could prevail, and beside her Takoda remained, a silent sentinel, his chest bare, muscles gleaming, long black hair flowing in the wind, tribal jewelry catching the first light of morning, a warrior who had become her shield and guide through the night's darkness. The first light of morning stretched across the desert, gilding the jagged cliffs in brilliant gold and deep shadows. The dust from the previous night's attack still hung in the air, swirling lazily in spirals as if the desert itself was slowly exhaling after the tension. Alizay stood near her sister's grave, hands trembling as she brushed dirt from her knees. She felt a strange mixture of exhaustion, relief, and a lingering unease, the kind that told her the night's danger had been only the beginning. Takoda stood a few paces away, bare chest gleaming in the morning sun, muscles taut and rippling, long black hair falling in waves over his shoulders. Tribal jewelry caught the light with every subtle movement, tiny jingles that echoed softly in the canyon's stillness. His eyes scanned the horizon, dark and penetrating, alert to every sound, every movement. Alizay had begun to understand that this warrior was not merely a protector. He was attuned to the desert in a way that felt almost supernatural. "Sir," Do we stay here?" she asked, voice small but steadying. Her gaze flicked nervously toward the cliffs, the shadows between them, and the silent expanse beyond. Takoda's voice was calm, low, and deliberate. "We do not linger where? Danger has passed, Alizay. The desert keeps its secrets, and some are meant to be found only when it wills them." Alizay shivered, though not from cold. There was a weight in his words, an unspoken warning. She nodded, clutching the bundle she had finally allowed herself to release once the grave was complete. The desert, vast and silent, seemed both protective and ominous, and she felt acutely aware of her vulnerability despite the warrior's presence as they prepared to move. A sudden glint near the cliffs caught Takoda's eye. He stepped forward silently, muscles coiled, instincts sharp. Alizay followed, uncertain but trusting him completely. There, half buried in dust and stone, was a small metal box ornate with intricate carvings that shimmered faintly in the morning light. It was out of place in the harsh desert, almost alive in its beauty. Takoda knelt, brushing the dirt carefully from its surface. Alizay gasped, "What is it?" He did not answer immediately, lifting the box to inspect it closely. His dark eyes narrowed, thoughtful and wary. "Something left behind. Something someone wanted hidden," he murmured. His fingers traced the carvings, and the desert wind seemed to hold its breath as if waiting for him to decide the next step. Alizay's curiosity overcame her fear. Do you think it belongs to my sister?" she asked, voice barely audible. "Takoda's." Expression did not change, though a shadow of doubt flickered in his eyes. "I do not know," he admitted, "but some treasures, or burdens, are found when the time is right. The desert has a way of revealing truths when they are needed most." Alizay reached out tentatively, and Takoda's hand shot out, resting over hers. "Patience," he said firmly. "Not everything is ready to be touched. Some things are dangerous, Alizay. Some things test the heart." Her pulse quickened, a mixture of fear and fascination coursing through her. The small box seemed to pulse in the early sunlight, almost breathing, as if it carried a life of its own. Alizay felt a chill, a sensation that something monumental was about to be revealed, something that could change everything she thought she knew about her sister, her family, and even the desert itself. Takoda rose slowly, holding the box in one hand. His bare chest gleamed in the sun, muscles taut and sculpted, his tribal jewelry jingling softly. He looked down at Alizay, dark eyes unwavering, and said, "The desert gives, but it demands. Are you ready for what it may show?" Alizay nodded, though her hands shook. She had buried her sister, faced danger, and survived the night, but this felt different. This felt like a doorway to secrets long hidden, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves. The desert stretched endlessly before them, golden light spilling across the cliffs and sand, shadows dancing in the wind. Takoda lifted the box carefully, and as he did, a faint sound, a whisper of metal against stone, echoed across the canyon. Alizay's breath caught in her throat. She knew, instinctively, that the moment the box was opened, nothing would ever be the same. And in that suspended silence, the desert held its secrets, waiting for the revelation that would shock both Alizay and the warrior who had guided her through grief, danger, and the unforgiving night. Takoda held the small metal box carefully, its ornate carvings glowing faintly in the morning light. Alizay stood beside him, hands trembling as the desert wind tugged at her hair. She felt the weight of the moment pressing down. This was no ordinary discovery. The box seemed alive in some strange way, humming with a secret that demanded to be unveiled. "Are you certain this is safe?" Alizay asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Her wide eyes reflected the first golden rays of sunlight spilling across the jagged cliffs. Takoda's dark eyes met hers, calm yet piercing. Nothing in the desert is without risk. But some truths must be seen, no matter the danger. He knelt slowly, muscles taut and gleaming, the tribal jewelry on his neck and wrists catching the light with each motion. His long black hair fell like a shadow over his broad shoulders, and the air around him seemed charged. A live dot with deliberate care, he lifted the lid. A soft click echoed across the canyon, followed by an almost imperceptible shimmer. Alizay gasped. Inside the box lay a collection of documents, fragile and yellowed with age, alongside a tiny, intricately carved necklace. Her eyes widened as she recognized the handwriting on the papers. They were from her family. Her sister included, letters revealing secrets long buried. She knew? Alizay whispered, tears welling in her eyes. She read the first few lines, learning of her sister's secret life of sacrifices made to protect Alizay, of hidden struggles, of a wealth of knowledge and a family legacy that had been kept from her for reasons she could scarcely understand. Her sister had been more than a child lost to grief. She had been a guardian of truths that now fell into Alizay's hands. Takoda watched silently, his presence steady, a rock amidst her swirling emotions. His bare, muscular chest gleamed in the morning sun, long black hair swaying slightly in the breeze, tribal jewelry jingling softly with each shift. The warrior's dark eyes held a depth that seemed to understand the gravity of this moment, the silent recognition that some lives were intertwined with the desert's secrets in ways beyond comprehension. Alizay's fingers trembled as she lifted the carved necklace, delicate yet strong, worn by her sister as a symbol of protection and courage. She wanted me to find this, Alizay said, voice trembling. She wanted me to know. Her words faltered, and she clutched the necklace to her chest, feeling the weight of her sister's love and wisdom. Takoda nodded slowly. The desert gives, but it also tests. You have proven your strength and your heart. Now the truth has chosen to reveal itself to you. His voice was calm, yet every word carried the weight of centuries of desert wisdom. Alizay's mind raced, absorbing the letters, the necklace, and the realization that her sister's life had not been in vain. She had been entrusted with a legacy, a secret that would shape her own path, just as the desert had shaped the path of the warrior beside her. She felt an unspoken connection to Takoda, not just as her protector, but as a fellow witness to the truths that the land held so jealously. Suddenly, the canyon seemed to exhale, the desert wind picking up, swirling dust and leaves around them in a shimmering dance of light and shadow. Alizay felt an overwhelming sense of closure, a peace she had not thought possible. She knelt briefly beside her sister's grave, whispering a final farewell, knowing that her sister's spirit would live on through her, guiding her in ways she could only begin to understand. Takoda placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The desert watches over those who honor it. You have done so, Alizay. Now go, carry her legacy, and let the world remember the courage of those who came before you. Alizay stood, taking a deep, steadying breath. She looked at Takoda, a profound gratitude in her eyes. Thank you for everything, she said softly. He nodded, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing at the corner of his lips. The desert does not need thanks. It only needs respect. As the sun rose higher, bathing the cliffs in golden light, Alizay tucked the necklace safely against her heart, letters in hand, and turned toward the path back to Red Creek. She knew her life would never be the same. The secret she now carried would guide her, and the memory of her sister would always walk beside her. Takoda watched her leave, his bare, muscular figure silhouetted against the rising sun, long black hair flowing in the wind, tribal jewelry catching the light. The warrior had fulfilled his role, but the desert had done something more. It had revealed the truth, tested courage, and forged a bond that would remain unspoken. yet unbreakable, between the girl and the guardian of the land. The desert returned to silence, its secret safe for now, waiting for the next soul brave enough to face its truths. And somewhere in the stillness, Alizay felt her sister's presence, whispering hope, guidance, and the quiet reminder that even in loss, love endures.